Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking a little bit about how to purchase a property in Western Australia. And today we have with us Kevin Sleight. He's one of the business owners from Focus Real Estate, which is one of the high court offices in Western Australia. Our office is based in Cannington. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, Amy. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you today?
It's a wonderful day to sell real estate in Perth, so
Yes.
every day.
Of course. Would you mind just tell us a little bit about your background before you get into real estate?
Well, it goes back a long way. My affinity with real estate started when I bought my first property at age 20, and I've had an interest in property all the way through. My early working life was involved in the banking industry. I had 10 years in banking and then went into financial planning. In financial planning, property features prominently, and in the early 1990s I started introducing direct property investment into all of our clients' portfolios, and they've all done particularly well. The opportunity to actually establish a real estate business came along when my current business partner and I, Dennis Peach, started together in business with a property development and building company, and we added the real estate office in 2005.
That's a long way, obviously so with your experience. Today we're going to be talking about very simply about how to purchase a property for people who have never bought a property in Western Australia before. Okay, with purchasing a property, what do you think should be the first step that anyone should take?
Ultimately, Amy, it usually always comes down to money, the capacity to purchase. So a person really needs to address their budget, how much money they've got, if they need to obtain finance, how much they can get. So step one would be more than likely a visit to a suitably qualified finance person who could give them an indication of their financial capacity. That's step one. Decide what it is that I've got to spend.
Okay, so step one, just taking into consideration how much you can spend. Okay, and then next would be, what would you suggest to do next?
Ultimately, it depends on whether a person's familiar with Western Australia or not, but the basic rule and the golden rule in real estate is location. So ultimately, different locations will attract people for different reasons, but some people may wish to be close to the water, some people may wish to be close to the city. Decide on the general location that you would like, and that's probably a pretty good second step in the process.
So once you know how much you can spend and you know where you want to live, would that determine the type of property that you can live in? Kind of.
Ultimately, then, that again is there's a number of different options depending on your family circumstances and of course your budget.
Yeah.
But whether a person is interested in a single home on a piece of land, or whether they're looking for apartment living, it all comes down to what's available in the location they've chosen and at what price.
Okay, let's assume that I am a buyer. I've done all that. I've got my finance sorted. I know where I want to live. I know what type of property that I want to buy, and I go viewing the property at either Home Open, search on the internet and things like that. Now you are the person who's selling it to me. If I want to buy this property, what's the step that I need to do then?
Ultimately, once you've identified a property that you're comfortable with, the system that we use in Western Australia to purchase a property is a system called the offer and acceptance. There's some documentation that the real estate agent would create for you as a buyer. Often the offer is made at a figure different to the asking price. A lot of people try to negotiate a better price, and that's the whole concept of making an offer. It may or may not be accepted by the owner. The offers also have the provision for special conditions. So there may be certain items in the property that the buyer would like to retain. There may be things that they would like repaired. It all depends on the condition of the property and exactly what they're wanting to achieve. So an offer can be written clearly with the buyer's desire, and then it's up to the owner to either accept what's been offered, to reject what's been offered, or to counter their offer with conditions that are acceptable to the seller.
So after my offer is accepted by the seller, what's the process from there as a buyer?
Ultimately, it does depend on the conditions that form part of the offer. It's very common for offers to contain a finance clause, and that may well be for a percentage of the purchase price. Usually a finance clause is given a time frame, so if the seller accepts the offer, the buyer then has a certain number of days, maybe 21 to 28 days, to obtain finance from their nominated finance company. And then once they've obtained their finance, other conditions may also need to be satisfied. Things like, for example, a building inspection or a termite and timber pest inspection. Things like that may be included, may not, but they may be. Usually, after finance has been approved, the offer and acceptance document will also have a nominated settlement date, and that date is usually 3 weeks after the date of finance approval. Of course, all of those things are nominated up front. They're all negotiated between buyer and seller, and they would be different if it was a purchase made by a person from overseas, because ultimately lots of people from overseas purchase property here in Western Australia. Often the process takes a little longer. Documents need to be verified and copied and so forth. So what may be common in the local market is a 6-week turnaround between making a successful offer and settling into the new person's name. It may take up to 2 or 3 weeks longer if the buyer was from overseas.
And for the non-resident buyer, they need to get an approval as well, is that correct?
Yeah, it depends whether the non-resident has got, if it's a foreign person, yes, they need to obtain Foreign Investment Review Board approval. It's unfortunately something that also comes with a fee.
Yeah.
So if a person from overseas wants to purchase a property, after they've identified their property, they would make their offer subject to approval from the Foreign Investment Review Board, and there's an online process that is fairly straightforward but does slow up the time frame a little bit.
Yeah. Or alternatively, the buyer can get an approval prior to making an offer.
Yes,
as
it
well.
does. It depends on the.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So the step from there. So what is settlement in general? A lot of people don't quite understand what settlement is in terms of buying property.
Settlement is a process. Ultimately, it's that transaction that ultimately transfers the ownership from the seller to the buyer. In most cases, settlements are undertaken by licensed settlement agents. It's another professional group that are part of the real estate process in Western Australia, and they go through and make sure that local authorities are advised that as from this date, this person no longer owns this property, that person owns it. They lodge all the appropriate transfer paperwork with the government authority that looks after titles in Western Australia. they organise the collection and payment of stamp duty on the transfer, which is also an expense that people need to be aware of.
Okay, so once a buyer put in an offer,
Yes.
get accepted, got the finance, everything settled, what happened after the property settled?
Well, ultimately the seller, if the property has been their home, their principal place of residence, has until 12 o'clock the day following settlement to remove their belongings.
Yeah.
So if settlement were to happen on a Monday, by Tuesday noon,
Yeah.
they need to be
Out.
out of that property and hand the keys, usually through the real estate
Yeah.
salesperson, to the new owners. And the settlement agent is the one that will have undertaken the settlement, will also have written to the local authorities to transfer council rates, water rates, all that sort of thing.
So as the new owner of the property,
Yes.
would now become your responsibility to take care of the council rates, water rates,
That's
and
right.
in some cases, if you buy strata property, you would be obviously
That's right.
responsible for that too.
If there's any common areas that are associated with the property that you've purchased, it's highly likely there'll be a strata levy. Usually levies are issued on a quarterly basis, and one of the roles of the settlement agent is to calculate the number of days that the previous owner was responsible and the number of days that the new owner is responsible.
Now we have learned the steps of buying property in Western Australia. Okay, is there anything that you like to advise the new buyers, the one that have not purchased a property in Western Australia before, what to prepare and what to do?
Ultimately, Amy, the most important thing a person can do is to speak with a reputable real estate agent who can help guide them through the various processes. Everything's new if you've never purchased a property before, and there's some important steps. So the first one is to know what you can spend, and the real estate person is likely to be able to introduce you to an appropriate finance specialist who can have a look at your circumstances and give you a guide as to, yes, you'll be safe to offer up to X for a property. The last thing you want to do is get your heart set on something that you may not be able to afford. The second thing, if you're a foreign buyer, you need approvals. The real estate person can guide you with how to go about seeking approval for your purchase, and generally rely on professional advice. Don't try and fly by the seat of your pants.
Of course. Okay, and thank you very much for taking your time off to speak to us today. Looking forward to see you in the next time coming. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure, no problem.